My dear brothers and sisters, the love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch. In today's Yes Talk, we have Manoj Pavitran, who is someone whom I have not met, but seen him several times the way you are seeing him today on the screen. And he's always come across as a very intellectually honest person, a sincere seeker, and very keen to see the acceleration of the evolution of the human consciousness, which is a key element in Sri Aurobindo's and the Mother's vision. By qualification, he's an engineer, and he has also a postgraduate qualification in design from the National Institute of Design at Ahmedabad. He has been staying at Auroville for the last 25 years or more than 25 years now. He moved there in 1995. And his current interests are higher education, design thinking, and making films. He has recently published a book, Pilgrims of the Infinite, which speaks for itself. So over to Manoj, and the title of his talk today is Evolution Fast Forward.
Thank you, Rameshji. Thank you, everyone. This title, Evolution Fast Forward, is actually the name of the film series that I am making. I have already made 3. The 4th one is in the making. That is on the spiritual history of India. That is yet to be released. I'm expecting it to come out on 15th of August as an offering to Sri Aurobindo. And since this is a small circle, and I assume everyone here are very familiar with Mother and Sri Aurobindo's works, probably we can make this more into a conversational space than a monologue. So from the lens of evolution fast forward, for example, today morning we had a group with whom we were sharing about the secret of the Veda, and particularly on Agni, the priest of Yajna, the power behind our evolutionary growth. So I'm coming from that space, and that is very much alive for me. And in this space, since you're already well established and well read, I believe, what are the living questions that may be of value? So I would like to actually pick up from you your concerns from a practical point of view. We have wonderful philosophy, we have a wonderful vision, and we have a world that is rapidly evolving technologically. Technology is evolving rapidly. And as one Mr. Wilson who said, we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and God-like technology. That's a deadly combination. We have powers in our hand that are God-like. The very fact that we are sitting in 6, 7 different places, and yet we can see each other. We don't even consider this as a miracle. This is now the new norm. And yet, our inner nature is more or less the same. And tremendous powers are in the hands of humanity. Leaders holding the nuclear weapons in their hands, bioweapons in their hands, artificial intelligence in their hands. But what is driving us? Our psychological nature, which is still bound to territoriality, egocentricity, carried by fear, stress, anxiety. That's where we are as a species. And the crisis is building up. More than 100 years ago, Sri Aurobindo pointed out it is an evolutionary crisis. At the time, it was not so visible as it is today. Now everyone admits we are in a huge crisis and an evolutionary crisis. And things are rapidly changing, and we are forced to evolve. So many people were resisting, say, Zoom, for example. Just 2 years ago, the entire humanity was onboarded online. There is a tremendous pressure to onboard onto this. On one hand, technology, which is godlike, and on the other hand, we have a psychology that is pretty ancient. So in that context, what are our challenges? What does evolution fast forward means to you? What would make sense? What kind of a conversation would make sense? Will be of value to you. So I would like to ideally see you also, Amritaji, Ramitaji, Sanjeevji. If you are also visible, that'll be lovely. Then we can see, have a conversation. And if you have something that is alive and that you're seeking, that edge of seeking, the seeker, that's where we meet the force behind evolution. So what is it that, as a seeker, that's burning in you?
Manojji, namaste. If I may start, am I audible?
Yes, very.
Yeah. Incidentally, I was driving in the morning and I was thinking about the topic, today's topic, that is evolution fast forward. And as I was driving, a thought suddenly struck me that the name itself, the name of the talk itself is evolution fast forward. And I was thinking that we are in such a world, we are always on the rush these days. Everybody is rushing for something or the other. And we want to finish our tasks at the earliest. And sometimes and we do compromise on the quality. We want instant answers. We want instant remedies. We want instant everything fast. So I was thinking that this world is moving so fast. And as you just mentioned that, okay, we are in an evolutionary, we are on a fast track right now. So is what we are experiencing right now, this fast mode of getting instant replies, getting instantly agitated, getting instantly dissatisfied if not met with the instantaneous responses or the products that we are seeking. Is it in some way reflecting this topic? Does it reflect in some way on this? Can we see a contrast, or can we see a similarity? Or so it this thought was there in my mind. So in fact, I had thought that I will ask about the topic, that evolution fast forward. Evolution as we see it, it's taken, it's like a millennium kind of a thing that we studied about and we think about it. But as we are seeing now ourselves and the world around us, it's fast. The one word that starts: fast knowledge, fast everything. So if you could just throw some light on that.
Yes, that's a very good question that we can all dwell on it. I'm speaking while thinking. It reminds me of Mother's observation that humanity has reached a point of stress, anxiety, and tension. Things are going faster and faster and agitated. Everyone is running around, restless. Reached a point of a breakdown, a very destructive, stressful, agitated state. Either we break down or we break through. There is no other option. That is the situation. And we all want breakthrough, not breakdown. But there is tremendous breakdown happening in the world. There is ecological breakdown, economic breakdown, psychological breakdown, which translates into breakdown of relationships and breaking down of the individual in their relationship with themselves. And loneliness and depression are growing like wildfire, like epidemic. Psychological disorders, particularly in the last 2 years, skyrocketing. So breakdown is very, very visible. Now, where are the rays of hope where some breakthrough can happen? Or what steps we need to take in order to break through this pressure that is building up? Even the very fact that we are all on Zoom, and within 2 years of time, entire humanity has been onboarded onto these technologies, and the very fact that we are all using these technologies now with ease shows that we are adapting, we are capable of adapting, and we are also able to relax into that space. Our ability to learn and adapt will become very, very crucial. And we can see that reflected in our National Education Policy, NEP 2020, where they say it is not what you study that is important, but your how to study and how to continuously study and learn, our ability to continuously learn. Learning to learn is the most important skill that is required. Now, what is the condition in which learning to learn can accelerate? Our ability to adapt, open to new possibilities, where we can actually relax into the tremendous force of evolution that has been brought forth on earth by Mother and Sri Aurobindo. In 1956, the supramental force has manifested on earth, and it has quickened everything. And she has observed that the human body, when it resists, or human psychology, when it resists the transformation, it will manifest in the form of diseases and breakdown. And so we have this option, either breakdown or breakthrough. And in order to break through, it is about learning to learn. And what is the best condition to learn? And learning involves an open mind, an open heart, an open vitality, and an open body. Otherwise, what happens is the very body in its early stage is very supple, receptive to learn. And as we age, the body increasingly gets fossilized, and its ability to adapt come down. And it is quite amazing to see when someone like Rameshji saying, I will make you host. The very fact that he has learned this whole thing, this modern technology, adopted it, and thriving in that space at this age, that's a sign that regardless of the age, we can learn and be calm and quiet with the emergence of something new that we cannot imagine. And when Mother gave the charter of Auroville, she said it is a place of unending education and a youth that never ages. And youthfulness, which is associated with that robust vitality and the capacity to learn, is something that has very little to do with age. In fact, it is when we stop learning, we stagnate, we fossilize. And yet, habitually, the body gets fossilized. Joints become stiff. Organs begins to fail, fade. And therefore, Mother gave such a great importance to the preparation of the body. Physical education. And this became more and more acutely obvious in 1926 when the overmental consciousness descended. And the discernment between overment and supermind became very obvious. The understanding that even the descent of overmind is not sufficient to transform the physical nature. It requires the supramental force to descend, to take up the physical substance and modify it. That became very, very obvious. And they were working on it, and then it is manifested. And now it is, the whole earth consciousness is shifting. And we are all pushed by something way beyond us. And those who translate it in terms of mind, its ability to receive new ideas, and translate it in technologies, they are converting that into modern type of technologies that are unleashing an exponential rate of growth. And we are forced to adapt. And humanity is adapting, but breakdown is happening on a wide scale. But a growing deeper and deeper understanding is happening. And Sri Aurobindo made a prediction about technological evolution, where he says, at that time, wireless telegraphy was the cutting edge technology. He said, wireless telegraphy is a sign of new orientation in nature. The nature has taken. And the machinery is kept only at the point of propulsion and reception. So we have mobile phones where it's not connected to any wire. The device is independent and it can transmit, and other end there is another device that receives. The wire in between has been removed. And he goes on to define that even this machinery will shrink all the way to nothingness. Material part will shrink, and the mind will learn to project the force upon its targets. And that's where we are heading in evolutionary terms. The current technologies are, we can still say, small steps on the way, still very, very rudimentary compared to what is possible when the human mind opens to higher evolutionary possibility, where Sri Aurobindo describes in the Ashtasiddhi, in his Sapta Chatushtaya, where ability to take cognition at a distance, transmit things at a distance, or even engage with action without direct means, force transmitting itself at distance. Right now, we need phones and all these things. But India always had this knowledge of opening to our higher evolutionary potential and accelerating its emergence, transforming our mind, transforming our vitality, even physicality. That knowledge was there, but somewhere down the line, that knowledge was lost. And now we are recovering it and learning to apply it, starting with preparing the very physical body and its ability to be receptive. And in its last essays, Sri Aurobindo refers to the possibility of the body to receive the new force. Mind is relatively very, very fickle, very fluid. It is changing all the time. So is the vital. It's very, very reactive. So in the process of reception, it distorts heavily. Whereas the body is the most passive of all three instruments: the mind, the vital, the physical, of which the body is the most passive instrument. But the trouble with the body is it is tamasic, unconscious, unreceptive. Therefore, preparation of the body to make it receptive, supple, open, this will come in as a very, very fundamental work to do for all of us. And this will translate into food, sleep, exercise. These three things fundamentally. And food plays a major role in increasing or decreasing the tamas, or making it rajasic. So it comes down to something very practical, daily life thing: what do we eat, and how we eat, how the food is prepared, because the food is a medium through which consciousness is also entering, and it is a material substance that carries the consciousness of matter itself, which tends to be heavy, and it goes down into tamasic nature. So that whole art and science of food, eating, refining it so that the body is kept light, receptive, so is our daily life exercises. So is learning to sleep. And unfortunately, as the pressure is increasing in the world, everybody is so agitated, so stressed out. More and more people need sleeping pills to sleep. So learning to sleep, and that's where what it means to then quieten the mind, calm the vital, so that we can open ourselves to the yogic force. And that will bring down the agitation, the stress, the tension, the anxiety. Not only that, it will bring all this down and establish peace, quietude. Then the Yoga Shakti can enter and work smoothly. That means the mind can receive wisdom coming from the inmost center or from the above space. That means we don't have to stress ourselves through hard thinking to know. Mind become open. And when we receive in the mind, it translates itself as right knowledge at the right time and stress-free. But that can happen only when we have that deep faith and surrender to that divine force that is acting. We may call it Mother's force, Sri Aurobindo's force, divine force. It is there working. So our daily life agitations can be dissolved only when we learn to open to that vaster force that will bring its calmness, wideness, harmony into thinking, into feeling, into action. Then what happens is we will discover that we are far more effective and efficient in our action. And we are doing more things without having a sense of you are doing all this, without having a sense of stress, anxiety. And you see that your inner evolution is accelerated. And a calming effect settles. And naturally, you begin to embody that spiritual atmosphere. And the inner being widens, or rather we step from the outer being to the inner being and open to that wideness. And an action that is wide, spontaneous, harmonious begins to unfold. And that's the gateway opening to the breakthrough. Otherwise, we will break down with the intensity with which the world is spinning things. And the change is accelerating. And since we are blessed with this wisdom given by the mother and Sri Aurobindo, and the force established by them, and that direct relationship that is possible, we are in a very, very privileged position, blessed position. But we must offer ourselves to the force so that we become the instruments of Mother's action in the world. The Shakti takes up the instrument, perfect the instrument. That's where the yoga will be directly guided and led by the mother. We become more and more like her children, feeling absolutely safe in her hands, free from stress, opening to her delight, Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi. who reveals more and more with her sweetness, her love, and her worldwide action. And she reveals her steps, and she shows the way. And that's a path that is opened by Sri Aurobindo and Mother. And we have to walk that path that opens the doors of breakthrough. But more and more people, when they are not open, they break down because change is accelerating. So we can begin to observe what is the resistance in me to change. The world is anyway changing, but I am on a course of resistance to change. There are parts that are scared. There are parts that are reacting, parts that are angry, upset, sad. And to bring them all together, come. Open to faith, open to sincerity, open to purity, so that fears are washed away. Anger is calmed down, sadness is removed, anxieties are removed. Then we are on an accelerated evolution, propelled by her love. Immense power of her universal love. And that's such a privilege.
Manoj, I think you have beautifully allayed the anxiety which was hidden behind Mithu's question. That anxiety is very natural because on one hand, we find that life is becoming more and more fast-paced. On the other hand, we feel that without a certain degree of quietness of the body and the mind, how will we be able to look deep within, which is something which is absolutely essential for understanding who we are and thereby accelerating the process of our spiritual growth, our rising of the consciousness, which is a part of the vision of the evolution that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have looked at. And on the other hand, while I mean this type of speed creates anxiety, there is an exception to every rule when it comes to accelerating the speed of evolution. That in fact is exactly the vision of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So that needs to be fast forward, that needs to go faster than it has been going in the past. That is their vision. And you have brought it out very clearly that strange are the ways of the divine. And even this technology that is has evolved had been predicted by Sri Aurobindo, and it is in one way or the other working out their vision. All we need is faith, sincerity, and surrender. So we keep doing our bit and leave the results to the divine. The divine knows which route to take to work out its designs, and we just keep doing our bit and not get too anxious. And ultimately, as you brought out, what it boils down to is love. So the more we try to sort of reject the negativities like anxiety and fear and insecurity, and the more we open to faith and sincerity, the more we'll be able to accelerate this process. And the key to all this remains love. As Sri Aurobindo says towards the end of Savitri, that great utterance, to feel love and oneness is to live. So basically, I mean, our task boils down to living a life which will become meaningful if it is full of love, inspired by oneness. Maybe, I mean, you may like to continue further and say something more, or some other participant might have another question to ask.
I would also like to add that what we it puts our effort. It's like a paradox. Effort to relax. It is kind of contradiction of terms. Yet, different ways of relaxing into the stillness, whether it is through painting, singing, writing, dancing, or simply sitting and resting. There are hundreds of ways to enter into the stillness that is one pole of our being. The deeper we go, the more still it is. As all the ancient rishis mention, it moves not. And that's a paradox, that the more we settle in stillness, the more dynamic our action externally becomes. In fact, less and less visible your outer form of action is. In a way, you see that the very field that you're establishing, or rather getting established in you, is accelerating many things towards increasing creative outflowing of that work. So we must find our ways individually to learn to relax and open, have complete faith, and open our own doorways to come in touch with that calm, wide force of Mother's action. It doesn't matter through which doorway you enter. We had been developing many methods, and verbal methods, non-verbal methods, all these are areas of research, how to make ourselves receptive. So one thing that emerged over the last 2 years for us is what we call the Savitri painting. You take one line from Savitri, listen to Sunil Das music, and then paint. And that become the doorway. That become the way of concentration. Otherwise, we tell somebody that you learn to concentrate when they try to sit tight, concentrating, and develop a headache. And there are joyful ways of entering into concentration. So painting, poetry, music, dance, all that help us to ease into the vast movement of their love. And each individual has to find their own way. And there is no fixed method that will work for everyone all the time. There isn't. There are all these infinite ways of the divine that will get revealed the more we seek the divine. So more sharing. I welcome all of you, others who have not shared.
Would any of the other participants like to say something?
Yeah,
Amrita?
this
Yes.
is Pradeep and Amrita. I think this ability to handle the pace of evolution is really important for us, and I think it's very important for the young children and the youth also. So for them, what do you suggest? Because obviously they are, from a spiritual point of view, they are still not there, but I think they still need to adjust to this fast pace of evolution. So what steps should they take?
Yes, our children are in a very dangerous situation where they are gripped through the mobile by the world forces that are just sucking the life energy of people, making money. And the way the media is constructed these days with the rapid cuts makes the children more and more agitated with increasingly shorter attention span and instant gratification, leading towards rapid breakdown as they reach their teenage, and they have this expectation once they start working that magic happens, and no magic, and they get into depression. And already in their 20s, I meet so many young people who are taking sleeping pills. Now that's a very dangerous, terrible situation we are in. One thing we need to find is the ways to help them to reconnect with nature. Nature is a great healing presence. And nature, everything is slow. So for them to heal, helping them to connect with nature, a plant, a tree, a sky, all that will be the healing touch coming through Mother Nature. Helping them to slow down, because the whole media is sucking them and making their minds more and more agitated. And they are exploding in their minds and the mental capacity, but other parts of the being are getting left behind. So activating them physically, connecting with nature, these are very, very crucial in this time to help the children to get grounded. Otherwise, it's a very dangerous situation. So creating time and space for that in every education system, even at home, everywhere. Do you have time to connect with nature? Play physically. These are very, very important for their body to open up and mind to calm down and energy to flow through. Connection with animals, plant world. So this has to be brought into education in a central way to balance, the counterbalance the damaging effect created by other public and social media interactions, and to have those spaces where they can share that, learning to observe what is happening to them in nature and learning to value that direct insight coming from nature, connecting with nature, getting to know them through that. And children are naturally admirers of heroes. So putting them in touch with people who are already living in a life of harmony. And they absorb like sponge. So we need living examples of people who are embodying peace, harmony. If the parents and elders themselves are agitated, stressed out, there is no way the children escape that situation. So obviously it comes back to adult education, teachers training, parents training, that gets translated into this. And for both, nature will play central role. Connection with nature. That's what I always highly recommend for everyone. Connect with nature, connect with nature. Because in nature, that force is working in harmony. And there is a certain richness of connection and immersion in nature. Soon all our children will be absorbed into the metaverse and they will be using only the seeing and hearing and a little bit of touch. Other senses will degenerate, and these senses will get amplified. We need to ensure that these senses are not degenerating. We have to put them in touch with nature. The smell, the taste, all that of nature, immersing in nature, so that they have a full immersion and a calming down with elements, water in particular, because our technologies are increasingly leveraging the fire element. So it is activating the mind more and more. Calming has to happen. And water is a lovely element to come in touch with. Earth, water, and being in farms and earth and gardens, and that's a place to learn and calm down and relate to. This has to be brought into the center of educational process. Observing nature, learning from nature, playing with nature. And that's also the space where new explorations in consciousness can happen. Where, how do you relate to a plant or with an animal and know the animal? And even accelerate the growth of a plant. All those possibilities open up. That's where the mind directly learning to interact with the life that is around and playing with it, and nature responding to human. That relationships gets rebuilt. So that's the doorway I would highly, highly recommend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll come back to you in a minute, Navneet. I think the key to what you said was rebuilding the relationship between parents and children. And therefore, spending some time together is important. If no other time, at least at meal time, during which there's a rule that we will not use the gadgets, the smartphones. Start with a prayer, end with a prayer, eat mindfully in silence or with quiet, loving conversation. And then having at home plants, maybe a few pets, so that the child learns to relate to nature. Apart from that, something which cannot be done on a daily basis, but occasionally what might help, I was thinking, was to go on a holiday to a place in the wilderness, where even if the children are permitted to carry the smartphone, it will not work. There's no network there. And that is where the child will be able to really appreciate nature, because the love for nature, I'm sure, is instinctive. It is not that in the younger generation it has died. It's just that it does not get an opportunity to blossom. So it is at such places, if you spend a week at such a place, the child may learn to reconnect with nature. So these are some of the things which are important. So the key thing is to, once again, reconnect with what is natural and instinctive, but the money power that the media have is using everything at its disposal, and it's not a secret anymore. They are employing psychologists, they are using artificial intelligence, they're doing everything possible to mold the behavior of the next generation, just for money. So money will always play an important role, and we cannot fight or sort of counteract it on its own terms in the same way, because the saner voices will never be able to have the same money power which these forces have. And as Sri Aurobindo and the mother, particularly Sri Aurobindo in that small booklet, the mother has talked about the money being in the hands of the asuric forces. And that will continue to happen, partly because the present level of human consciousness is not what they visualized in the near future. And partly because there are hostile forces which are not interested in the earth evolving and the human consciousness evolving. So because of that, probably one of the major forces in the world, that is money, may continue to be predominantly in Asuric hands for quite some time to come. But we have to approach the whole problem in another way, from another angle, and thereby try and show the children what is it that is truly better, more satisfying, more pleasing, even to these children, even in today's world. So we have to expose them to that more and more. And that is basically all aspects of nature, the type of communication that is possible with plants, with animals, and of course, the parents and other people, human beings around us. Human beings, including those who are less privileged than us, on whom we can shower love by giving that we have and they don't have. So that sort of complementary situation, giving what we have to those who need it, brings the type of joy which the smartphones may not. So these are the types of joys that we have to expose our children to. Now, there's one hand up, Navneet. So I think we can, that can be the last question, because we are nearing the end of the session. If it becomes too long, then, the attention span in any case being limited, not many are able to sustain it. So we'll have Navneet's question or comment as the last one. Yes, Navneet.
On one hand, we are talking about evolution fast forward. On the other side, we are saying slow down. How do we reconcile? And secondly, about individual evolution. We get periods in our life when we find instead of evolving, we feel we are regressing. In our sadhana, we get difficulties despite our sincere efforts. Why does that happen, and what do we do?
The acceleration of evolution happens when we surrender to that yogic Yoga Shakti. And Yoga Shakti acts in vast calmness and stillness. So that is paradoxical. On one side, it is acting with vast calmness. On the other hand, it accelerates our evolution. But you don't feel stressed out by that process unless there are resistances. And that is where this sense of regression that happens in the process of transformation. As the force enters deeper, the stuff that needs to be transformed will rise up automatically. And when that rises up and clouds our mind, grips our emotions, we feel more miserable than ever before. I mean, see, I was in a much better condition before. What happened? I have regressed. Terrible I am in a situation. I am not faithful to Mother. I am not sincere. I am going away in the wrong direction. This also happens when the inner light is increasing, and it will expose all the insincerity and all the gaps in our practices, all the hidden cheating that we do, everything gets exposed, and it becomes so embarrassing. And it seems that I was much better before. It's just that it's an increased awareness on one side. On the other side, it has been brought into your field of awareness for transformation. So the old saying that ignorance was bliss, now, it is true when we are unconscious. Then as we become conscious, there is this embarrassing complexity and incapacity to transform ourselves, our vehement, insistent habits that won't easily budge. So the Agni has brought the light, not the force has not yet awakened, the will has not yet awakened, and our mental will is limited. That's why we need to open to the divine voice of Agni, which brings the will, the divine Shakti, the power that actually transforms. That's the only space where the reconciliation of these things can happen. And the process gets really, really accelerated. Even when you encounter difficulties, challenges are thrown at you, you will still smile and say, okay, here is another opportunity that is brought to my way. And divine has brought in, and divine will show me the way how to resolve it. Instead of our little mind trying to figure this out, we approach the divine for every little thing. So the guidance comes. This is how you can deal with it. And then, as Gita says, Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayade girim yat kripa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. So that surrender to the divine, to the divine's play, will make the path very easy, the sunlit. The difficulties are there, but the inner being is becoming more and more free. You see that the outer being is suffering, the ego is walking in, walking out, it going through its own cycles, stuff is rising up, falling off, old habits coming up, some falling off. But the inner being becomes more and more free and untouched, incorruptible. And you experience the freedom. And slowly the outer being gently undergoes transformation. It becomes more and more receptive, become more and more responsive. So that's a slow and beautiful journey to sunlit path, where stillness and action are together. That's the signature of the integral Godhead. On one end is universal movement, other end is a stillness that is immobile, universal. He and she are the might and right in things. This is the knot that ties together the stars. It is their play. He and she are secretly married in our thoughts and deeds. And we increasingly see their play. It is their play. We are given the privilege of seeing that play. A whole new world they are creating. And we are in such a privileged position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manoj. I think the questions were basically about contradictions. The first question about the contradiction between the fast-paced life and the imperturbable peace that we associate with spiritual progress. The second question about the contradiction between what the media are doing to the younger generation and what we expect if the evolution were to accelerate. And the third, the contradictory signs that we find of evolution getting faster and on the other hand getting slower. These contradictions are at the mental level, and the mental constructs are not a very reliable way of judging the spiritual events, the future of the planet in terms of evolution. These mental constructs can be very misleading. And if one were to see how that unshakable, imperturbable peace can be achieved even in this fast-paced world, one just has to look at Manoj Pavitran's face. He's also living in the same world, which has the same media and the same type of contradictions, the same fast-paced life, and He has a background where he could have easily lived in that type of a world and pursued what much of the world seems to be pursuing, money, name and fame and power and prestige. But instead he chose something else, and see what peace it has brought to him. So all these things are happening simultaneously in the world, and the good things have a way of prevailing. Some of the take-home messages which we got today were either we break down or we break through. Another one, doesn't matter which door we enter. So there is not one, but so many innumerable ways by which we can approach the divine, and it lot will depend upon our own swabhava, swadharma, and our peculiar sort of situations in which we are placed. So that is what will determine the door through which we enter, but any door is good enough to go in that direction. And the one common factor to no matter which door we enter would remain that element of love, a sense of oneness with those around us, which in turn would inspire love and would automatically guide us towards what we should be doing, forgetting our little self and sharing what we have with those who need it, those who happen to be around us. And that sort of remains the key. So with that, we can come to the end of today's session. Thank Manoj Pavitran for a very illuminating session. Next week at the same time, that is next Saturday on the 9th of July at 6 p.m. Indian time, we will have Sri Vidya, who was one of the participants attending the session today. Sri Vidya is a person who has, after doing a PhD in psychology, seen higher education as well as school education. And particularly when she was in contact with higher education as a teacher, she realized that a lot of students are there just because they want to pursue a degree, but actually they want to do something else in life. And having got their degrees, most of them do not end up doing what they were studying. They enter something else. And that gave her an idea of how to resolve those contradictions, which create a lot of stress for these students, and what are the sources of these contradictions. And therefore, she handles it at two levels, by coaching those who are looking for a career, or those who have found a career and have got frustrated with it and are looking for a transition. So these are the two categories of people she deals with, and some of it she'll talk about on the basis of her experience next week, the 9th of July at 6 in the evening in her talk. So with that, we thank no, sorry, the session is over. No, sorry. No. You see, one of the things in yoga is discipline. Discipline means that we have to go as per rules. You can always write something in chat or send an email and we'll handle it. Now, so with that, we thank Manoj once again. And of course, above all, thank the mother and the master for making these sessions possible. Hope to see you next week again.